Well, welcome to the first official Moxie workshop after our rebrand this week. Hopefully
Yay.
everybody's digging the purple and black color scheme. I'm pretty into it, but I might be biased. Um, our workshop series is an extension of our education platform. And so every 2 weeks, we bring awesome presenters like Greg onto the show to teach us some skills and tactics to be better freelancers and entrepreneurs. So I'm really excited to have Greg here. For me personally, Greg has been very impactful into the growth of our company. Greg was one of the early adopters when it was still called Hectic. And I've probably spent like a solid week chatting with him straight just on features and improvements and things we could be adding. So a lot of the functionality, especially more on the invoicing and payments and a lot of the proposal side, Greg had a huge hand in helping us kind of guide the direction of that. So I'm psyched to have Greg here. Awesome resource for the community, and yeah, welcome.
Thanks, man. That's a very nice way of saying this is what my most annoying customer who asks for a lot of things. But the fact that you actually delivered on like 99% of it is incredible. And that's why I'm like went from user to fan.
Awesome.
We are, I don't know if I can do a better intro than that for Greg, but it is an absolute pleasure to get to introduce you to Greg today. He is just an incredible human being and also a really experienced freelancer. And I think the Q&A section at the end is going to be amazing. So any questions you have about anything, I think Greg can answer it. That's how much confidence I have in you, Greg. So
but slide deck is so bad. Hold out for the Q&A.
No, the slide deck is funny. The Q&A will be amazing. Greg is one of our favorite people to chat with. And so we just had to share you, Greg, with the world, with the rest of the Moxie world here. So if you do have questions, you can drop them in Q&A. You can also drop them in chat. We love to hear from you. So anytime Greg says something, if it sparks a question or a comment, feel free to try to distract him in the chat and say something outlandish. But without further ado, my awkward handoff to Greg.
Oh, you think that was awkward? Wait for it.
I've been working on making it less awkward and failing.
that was actually pretty good. So thanks, Michelle. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. So let's talk about how to discover your niche. And I sliced off the thing on the end where it says, and delight your clients, because let's face it, your mileage may vary. But one thing that I think is really important to kick off with is sort of, I want to address immediately the issue that people often feel around niching down. And that is that, there's actually kind of a little bit of pressure. And I think it's the result of the evolution of the freelancer community and, kind of businessless work environments where people are just naturally specializing out and dividing off. So that's like the kind of the push behind niching down. And over the past year, I went through that process. And so this is less about teaching, more about just kind of sharing my experience. And I'd really love to hear your feedback. So please, chime in as you see fit. So in terms of my backgrounder, one of the reasons, I'll let you just go through the deck, but one of the reasons I chose to highlight this background is to basically say two things. One is, damn, I'm getting old, it looks that way. And the other is I've been blessed with a lot of diversity in my life. I've been able to do a bunch of different things, starting with horrible 80s rock bands, music career, which actually ended up being a hell of a lot of fun, but not very productive, as you would expect. And then, a full-on career in IT and IT management, and then moving into the, web development and media production space, and then finally just kind of going solo and freelancing since 2018. And what I realized through that process is that, first of all, I'm an experienced junkie. I like to do a lot of different things. I get bored easy. I'm the typical not going to niche down personality. And yet recently I decided to do so over the past year. And it feels like the result of that is two things happened. One is I actually wasted no experience. All of my background, everything I've done in the past feeds into my experience of working with my client base now. So niching down didn't mean throwing away aspects of my skill set, which was lovely. And a pleasant surprise, actually. Even stuff from the music days, like the rig I'm talking through now was informed by doing sound for 80s bands way back in the day. And the other thing I think is really important is that over time, I've noticed, like I've had a fairly long career. So over the past, say, 30 years, I've noticed a gradual process that kind of gave me the equipment, gave me the tools to be able to niche down and provide meaningful help to a specific community who can really benefit from that help. And that's kind of what I wanted to share a little bit of today. So let's get on with it. Why? Oh yeah, that's 80s, Greg. So why would you want to niche down in the first place? I think there's four key things to bear in mind here. First of all, it lets you focus. And by that, I mean, it lets you focus on a specific group with a shared set of challenges that you're equipped to solve. And so by being able to focus, I noticed in my own experience, I was able to really dial in. It wasn't like each new project brings a new set of challenges and a learning curve associated with it. I was actually able to get to know very deeply what the key challenges are for my client base and kind of get in their heads, even though I've got nothing to do with the field that my niche clients work in. I was able to kind of gain a deeper understanding and the repetitive nature of dealing with the same type of client activities over and over again. It didn't get boring. Instead, it got deeper and it got more nuanced. And I really enjoy that. What it allowed me to do is specialize. And by that, I mean specialize my services to tweak them and dial them into those specific challenges so that I can come up with a solution that's actually spot on what they need. And if I do it right, it's a marketing boost as well, because I don't know anybody else that does it as well as I do for my specific niche. There probably is, but let's imagine there's not. It also lets me productize those services. And this is the biggest benefit of all, I think. Instead of each new project that comes through the door, and let's look at it from a Moxie perspective, a client, gets in touch with me, fills out a form or books a meeting with me. I walk through, I build a form that, does a requirements survey or some kind of client intake form. And then I build out a proposal, hope maybe, it supports templates, so I can drop a template in there, but I'm probably going to have to customize the hell out of it based on the specific requirements of that unique client. And now I'm able to use the same infrastructure. And in fact, I just did this earlier this week. I was able to rebuild my proposal so that it's got the elements of the product I created, the services product I created to serve my specific niche. So way less work, way more predictable. And on the website, I just did a rebrand as well, just before these guys, and they copied me, go figure. I was able to rebrand and rebuild the website. So instead of having a services page, I don't have that anymore. I have a pricing page. I'm actually able to publish my 2 plans and my little pricing guide. And you can, even though I develop websites for a living primarily, you can actually go to this pricing page and see what it's going to cost before we speak. And that in my niche, in my field, is an unusual thing. So it allows me to deliver a more predictable result to the client. But more importantly, it allows me to package up something that someone like Michelle can benefit from, because it really allows you to dial in on the specific requirements of your client and come up with something that you can repeat. And that gets to the last point, which is iterate. And I think this, beyond being able to productize the services, I think this is from an operational perspective, the largest benefit for me, especially as a freelancer. When you do individual projects for individual clients that have their own unique set of requirements, then you're basically custom tuning. You might be starting with some kind of foundation, but you've got to customize it out from there. So you're building a custom, again, using Moxie, you're building a custom proposal, and that needs a custom project, an invoicing structure, and maybe you've got recurring payments in there, or maybe it's just, on a 50-50 project basis. It's all different for every client. And I've still got projects ongoing that are using my old structure. But now I can template all that stuff. I've got a templated proposal. I've got a templated project invoice for 50-50 payout. I've got payments. I've got the recurring. Bless you, Jeff. You came out with the recurring invoicing just in time for my rebrand. So I actually just dropped my first recurring invoice. And I was able to send a proposal to the client that had their pain points, my solution, project breakdown, scheduling and all that kind of stuff, and the recurring stuff, and the payment information, and the signature block, all in one proposal. It one-stepped everything. And I templated it because I can use it again and again and again with all my clients. And the only thing I need to do is modify it to be the standard plan or the premium plan. Brilliant. It works really well. So by creating an iterative process that you can do with your clients, not only does it ease the kind of client onboarding workflow, it also allows me to distribute process improvement, not just to the client I'm working on, but every new client instance is an instance of that process that I get to improve, not just for future clients or the existing client, but also for my past clients. I can go back to their accounts and say, hey, we just finished with this client and we implemented an improvement. So now I can drop it platform wide. So, just like with Moxie, when you use Moxie and you come across a bug, God forbid, or you come up with, more importantly, a really cool feature, and Jeff hammers it out in an hour, as I've seen him do, and you're able to push that improvement across the entire platform so that all clients benefit, not just the one that reported, their feature request. I can do the same thing now because I've got not, a platform like Moxie, but because I've got a stable of templated, a stable of services that solve the same problem and use the same architecture. So that really gives me an opportunity to create a very unique experience for each and every one of my clients. It's all customized still, but I can push changes from my latest project out to previous projects and make that a whole iterative process so that the product improves over time for everybody, past and future. With that in mind, there are some circumstances where you might not want to niche down, and especially with a personality like mine. Like I say, I get bored easy. So if you're, a generalization guru, if you like change a lot, if you, like a lot of diversity in your work life, or if you just like solving new problems all the time, well, like I said off the top, there's this kind of feeling that, because of the evolution of the freelancer economy, and because everyone's markets are getting saturated, and so we're looking for ways to specialize and niche down, that doesn't mean you have to. And if you're the type of person that enjoys, a new challenge, or if you have any of these attributes, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a generalist. There's lots of them out there, and it doesn't need to be for you. But I noticed that these days there does tend to be a little bit of social pressure around it. Like, oh, if you're not niching down, you're just not following the latest business trends, and you'll probably fail or get eaten up by, ChatGPT. I don't think there's a problem with that. And in fact, I think one of the biggest challenges that people face is kind of the FOMO aspect of it. Fear of missing out. If I niche down on this client group, am I losing opportunities that could have come along? And I could actually, I was kind of curious as how I would speak to this deck. And as it turns out, recent circumstances have completely changed that. So I'll give you two examples. One is I'm working on 2 projects right now that have nothing to do with my niche. My niche is Canadian mental health practitioners in solo private practice. So it's a pretty tight niche. Well, I'm working on 2 projects right now. One is to build a learning management system for an Indigenous school board, and the other is to rebuild a website I built a million years ago for a dog rescue organization, charity. So, just because you've chosen a niche and you market yourself in that way, that doesn't mean you're tied to it forever and that you can't proliferate. Also, just this past about 2 weeks ago, I was contacted by a doctor, an MD in general practice, and he runs like an addiction recovery clinic, and so they have MDs and mental health professionals working together in the clinic to kind of provide a holistic resource for their clients. And so that means there's mental health practitioners. One of my clients gave a referral and he said, oh, I noticed that you've recently niched down to just solo practice, but I have a group practice. Well, I modified my new pricing page to say, oh, and if you grow beyond solo practice into group practice, add it, get our team member add-on, and add, in other words, there's creative ways to, to change the plan as required. And I think that's important. But before, if as you go through the process of niching down, I think these are 5 questions that really helped me, and hopefully it would help you as well. So first up is, which clients do you enjoy? And I think this is number 1, is that if you don't love the mission of the people you're working with, or if you're not kind of inspired to do it, excuse me, to do it, then you're probably not going to have a good ride. I spent 22 years working with running the IT department for a faculty of dentistry, so like a dental school. And I mean, dentists can be great people, but they wouldn't be, you'll notice I don't build websites for dentists now. I had a belly full of dentists, wonderful people, but that was plenty, but I did stay within the healthcare space, and I thought, what, there's a global mental health crisis going on, and the people that are delivering that service aren't necessarily very technical. So there's this gap, right? And that speaks to the next item, which is, where are your unique skills? So I've got a unique skill set, web development, media production, IT background. So it's kind of easy for me to deliver the services that they actually need, because during the pandemic, all, therapy went online. And so you've got all these people trying to figure out what we're doing right now. And that was, a technical challenge. I'm like, so I've got a client base with a low general technical proficiency. And so that means I need to tune my services to speak to that challenge. And I'm uniquely equipped to do that because I worked with dentists for 22 years, also not a technical group. Where is the unmet need? Well, I think I just articulated that. You get non-technical people using technology to deliver their core service online. So that's, kind of a gap that I identified. And really, I identified it by kind of looking at some of the web. I had a client come along who was a therapist, and I looked at other therapy sites, and I'm like, these all suck. They deserve better. Let's build better websites for therapists. And of course, what are the best prospects? Now, I should explain this a little bit. Basically, what this means is you wouldn't want to niche down on a bunch of people that say don't pay their bills, or aren't, brand new startups that are cash strapped. We'll help you. Well, the churn's going to be interesting, isn't it? So you obviously need to put some practical guardrails around the group that you want to work with to make sure they're actually going to help you meet your business objectives as well as you meeting theirs. And this last one, I have a nice story on, and that is, what would you do anyway? I remember when I got first hired back, like I'm talking mid-90s, into the IT industry, and the guy that hired me, I kind of knew him a little bit. And so he hired me on a Friday. I went to his office on a Monday, and I said, I think I just kind of screwed you over because, you're going to pay me a pretty decent wage to do this. I would do it for free. I do this stuff at home all the time anyway. And he's like, nah, I kind of feel like I screwed you because I already know that. In other words, if there's something that you're so passionate about that you would probably do it anyway, wouldn't it be cool to work with really cool people doing stuff that you're pretty good at and solving a real problem for them and they're the kind of people that are not only nice to work with, but healthy to work with, then yeah, I'd probably want to do that anyway. The fact that you get paid becomes kind of a bonus, and I've heard, Jeff and other folks at Moxie say the same thing. Like, the other two people on this call are also unemployable. So they build tools to help other unemployable people remain gainfully employed or gainfully in business anyway. And I think that if you can tick all 5 of these boxes, then you've nailed your niche. So how far do you drill down? Like how much is too much? Because I've heard people say, I said to Jeff when I pitched this thing, I said, niche down so hard that even robots can't touch you. And he said, yep, that's the title. But I think there is a too much factor. I mean, if you're sitting around saying, okay, I've niched down so hard, there's like 3 people in my target audience and 2 of them are already clients. Yeah, maybe you've gone a little too far. So I can't speak to everybody's use case, but I can speak to mine. So let's take it from the top. So I deal with mental health professionals with, a college membership, meaning they're like, a part of a professional regulatory college. They're legit, basically. And they're in Canada because, Canada, US, and other places internationally have different rules. And it actually kind of makes sense for me to niche down even tighter than that, and maybe just Ontario, my own province within the country, because each province in Canada kind of has its own regulations and each college has its own requirements and guidelines. I can become really highly knowledgeable with the restrictions and requirements within my own catchment area. And that way I can speak at a higher level to my clients about stuff that they might not even be that familiar with themselves. Like, can you use Zoom to deliver therapy in Ontario? That's a pretty good question. And I'm not sure all of the people in my target audience would be able to answer it. So if I can, that brings value to my niche and to my clients. And finally, I decided to go even tighter, and it's like get the freelancer factor in there and do the mental health professional equivalent of freelancing, which is lighting up a solo practice. This is partially on the heels of the pandemic, where nobody could go into their group practice anymore. So they all stayed home, fired up a camera and delivered online, telehealth based video therapy. And for a lot of people that stuck, but now they're in this position where they're like, okay, I left my group practice, but now I can't walk up to the reception desk anymore, speak to the office manager and have all of my technical and admin issues addressed. I'm kind of on my own, and oh yeah, I own a business now, so I have to deal with all the things involved with that. So I thought, okay, well, wouldn't it be cool if there was a business that kind of replaced that front desk where you can actually still get help and knowledgeable support and, all the administrative and infrastructural back end required to run your practice without the cost of actually having a bricks and mortar office to walk into and the staffing required to make that happen. So we offer that out as a service, and that's how I chose to niche down. Now, you might just choose to back off to like here and say, yep, that's plenty. I want, professionals that are, that are accredited, basically, or, within my location, or you could go even more specific and say, and they have to work by themselves. It's really up to you, but I think it's probably where I should stop with the niching down, and it's like, and you have to have a slightly smaller left foot, and I think probably wiser to leave it tight initially, because guess what? You can always widen that out. You can always broaden out later. And I think that's a point that gets missed. It's like, oh, well, what about, that FOMO kicks in. It's like, well, the guy with the group practice that hit me up, well, I'm onboarding that guy tomorrow. He's a client now. And we're going to, and I love the project. I mean, it's a really cool project. But he didn't say, oh, he only does solo practitioners. Okay, well, that's not for me. I'm a group practice. He just sent me a message and said, do you, I know you do solo, but can you do group? And I'm like, yeah. And then 15 minutes later, I said, go to the pricing page. It's got an add-on for you. And there's, it also pointed out a flaw in my niche, because it's like, oh yeah, what if a solo practitioner lights up with me? And then they want to partner with somebody and start up a little twosome group practice. Oops, so I needed a way to accommodate that. So he actually gave me a month into the rebrand, he gave me a new expansion opportunity that I hadn't even identified. So, that's, I think, the key is when in doubt, you can always pivot, you can always expand, and you can always adapt, especially if you're a small player like me. It's not like you've got this gigantic client base like the massive Moxie folks. So, you can actually, pivot on the fly and make changes as you see fit. You run the thing, you can do whatever you want with it. It obviously needs to make sense for your clients, but guess what? I rebranded a little over a month ago, made a pretty big pivot in what I do. And my clients yawned at it. Nobody cared. They're just like, well, just keep delivering amazing service and we'll be good. And none of the, Moxie's resilient. I do all my business on Moxie, and it's resilient enough and it's malleable enough that it can handle the way I did business before and the way I do business in the future. It can have all of the things, and it presents it in an intelligent way. So there's no pain, there's no pain involved in that process. And that kind of wraps it up. So in terms of key takeaways, I think it's really important, to go through those steps of focusing, specializing, and productizing, because that puts you in that, enviable position of being able to implement an iterative improvement process. And that's key, so that instead of doing one-off projects and figuring out problems you'll never have again, you'll never solve for anybody else, you actually get to take those improvements and not only apply them to the next client in the queue, but to everybody that came before. So everybody gets a better ride. And now you're, instead of, trying to somehow, fold those improvements into your existing workflows, instead you're making really cool announcements in your newsletter or whatever to your existing clients saying, hey, we just came up with this really cool thing. We think you'll like it too. If you'd like to turn it on, click here, kind of thing. And so it's just, the kind of iterative improvement that Jeff and the team can do at Moxie. I can do that now too. So I can, it makes me feel like a bigger fish. But, bear in mind, niching down is not for everybody, and you don't have to if that's not your bag. But you can always make changes later. And just because you've, from a marketing perspective, decided to niche down on this specific group, that doesn't mean you can't take on other projects. I'm still doing dog rescue, learning management systems, and, building for group practices. And on Friday, I'm also onboarding a straight up legitimate, right in my niche, client. So you can do all the things and still, set up this kind of focused approach. And as a bonus opportunity, which I believe we're going to hear something about from Moxie side shortly, you get to build a community. And this is a cool thing. Sorry for the thunder steel. This is kind of cool because now, and this actually didn't dawn on me, I'm old dim, so it didn't dawn on me until later in the niching process, where I went, yeah, I guess I'm going to be hanging with a lot of therapists and getting to know this community really well, but from a unique perspective that they don't necessarily, wouldn't necessarily dawn on them immediately. And this dawned on me because I was checking out all these different podcasts and other resources from, from this community, from the mental health space. And I was listening to some people, when you work in a profession, you tend to ask advice of people in that profession. So it wouldn't be weird for one therapist to ask another therapist, hey, I need a new website. Who's your guy? Who do you use? And so you get these podcast episodes on what to do, how to build a website for your practice and how to set up. And the advice was atrocious generally. I mean, so it's kind of like, I understand why you'd want to ask your colleague for advice outside of your field. But, as a web developer, another therapist is probably not going to give you very good advice on how to build a website, right? So I thought, there needs to be somebody in here saying, no, please don't do that. Do it like, here's the right way to do it. And so that kind of gave me an opportunity, but also it gives me a seat at the table, so I can walk in as a non-practitioner and say, yeah, you're the experts here, but here's my little field. So, it gives me a relevant voice that makes a positive contribution to that conversation. And that enables you to build branded community around it, because there's lots of podcasts and whatnot, like in my own niche, lots of mental health podcasts, even a bunch of them for practitioner to practitioner, kind of B2B stuff. but there aren't too many that deal with just the business of, especially bringing in people like myself and even hosted by people like myself who are not experts in that particular field, but who actually come from a technical background and focus on the technical and business kind of back end aspects. You know, kind of like Moxie does for, you know, freelancers like us, right? You know, it's freelancer OS. So yeah, here's a tool you can use, but there's also a community and events like this one to be able to help you advance your work. Well, now I'm positioned to be able to do similar things for my community as well. So it's kind of a nice bonus. And that, my friends, puts it over to you. So what I would suggest is, if you're thinking about niching down, you know, ask yourself, who is the perfect client? You know, think back of all the clients you've worked with and get really specific with this. You know, who, if I had to choose like one client from my, you know, portfolio that I was going to be my one and only client forever, who would that be? What attributes would that person have? And then, and here's the key, take yourself into their perspective and imagine what their dream product would look like. Like if you were able to create the perfect set of services or the perfect product to, you know, from within your skill set to be able to solve their problem, what would that look like? And then here's the hardest part. Imagine, describe that project to that perfect client, right? So how would you describe that perfect product to that perfect client? And if you can do those three things, I think you've defined your niche, and you're pretty much 99% of the way to niching down on that specific group. And that, my friends, is all I got. So, Michelle, I'll go back to you and take any questions.
Are these your animals?
They are. That's Hamish.
That's the most important question.
Yeah. There's
Even the
Hamish,
cat?
but I'll put a negative spin on it. Those are all my animals, and he's the one you're looking at right now is the only one that's still alive.
Oh,
they're
no.
all that we got them all at the same time. That was about 15 years ago, and he is the last man standing. You know,
aw,
so,
he's
but
very
yeah, so
sweet.
this is also kind of like a tribute deck to those guys, because yeah, that was Nabby the cat, Tavish the Westie, and this is his brother Hamish.
Very sweet. I like the tribute. All right, so let's get into some questions. A couple folks had this question: when moving from generalist to niche, how do you update your portfolio? Is it better to leave up all your examples or only show the niche examples, even if it's a small amount?
Well, I think I can give a very practical answer to that. And that is that when you first niche down, you don't have too many examples. Probably you might have one or two examples of your niche. But if you look at my portfolio page, I got everybody in there still. You know, you see the dog rescue, and, you know, I think there's like a real estate agent in there somewhere. I don't see a problem with demonstrating breadth in your portfolio while still niching down. However, what I would suggest is that make your newer work examples within your niche, excuse me, so that they're not looking at it saying, wait a minute, you say you work with, you know, lawyers, but this is a plumbing website. What's going on here? You know, so you want to keep it relevant. I think the top item in my portfolio right now is actually a directory site I built for Canadian youth and teen care providers, which is like within the niche space, but it's a little bit specialized, and it's not exactly an example of the product today, but it's relevant to my niche, and I think that's okay. I'm curious what other people have to say on that. I'm happy to be wrong.
I mean, I think, like, you know, put a little label over it, like past work, right? Everybody goes through career iterations, like things you did in the past that still show your expertise in building websites or technology or whatever, but maybe not in the niche.
Good point. Good point. I
Nothing
mean,
wrong with
you want to show the depth of knowledge within that niche, but that doesn't mean you can't show off your breadth as well. I mean, I used to
Yep.
show off. I used to shoot a lot of video. I haven't figured out how to showcase that stuff yet, but I don't think that's lost on this audience.
Love that. Jasmine asks, can I be niche in my client base versus in my offering?
I think if the offering works for the client. But now, my approach is start with the client, start with a client base that has a shared set of problems, and then modify your solution to solve those problems. So everything's client focused, right? So if I make really great ice cream and I want to focus on, on people with obesity issues, that's probably not matching the solution to the, to the audience very well, right? But I'd love to know more actually about this specific use case, because I think it's totally possible. If you start by, hey, I'm a photographer and I do really good portraiture, then you might want to choose a niche audience that fits very well with your skill set. But once you've chosen a niche down, I would suggest that you would want to tune your services. So as you learn more about your target audience, you're actually getting really good at building solutions for them.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you lose, if you focus on niching clients, but still being broad in your offering is, a lot of the efficiencies you were talking about, productizing and creating repeatable systems. You just end up solving different problems for similar clients. And, you may enjoy that. It kind of goes back into one of your slides that you had in there talking about people who like to solve different problems all the time.
Sure.
So, I think, from my standpoint, niching happens for two reasons, right? Either you want to get very specific in a market that you're talking to, so you can create some brand recognition and, get people to recognize you, or, you can go further. And that's kind of what you're teaching today is, creating repeatable processes so you have an efficient business so you can maximize your earning and minimize your stress, right? They're both valid reasons to niche. And, Jasmine, I think client-based niching, ton of value in it. Just recognize you'll still be solving a lot of different problems all the time.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Big fish, small pond is a good reason to niche, but especially from a freelance, like the smaller the operation, the more you benefit from iterative improvement and tightening up your product offering. So I agree 100%.
Yeah, Jasmine, I think this, you can correct me if I'm wrong in chat. I think this is also your question. I'm a problem pro strategist type. Can you give a niche example in that field? I think that's interesting. I'm stealing your answering here, Greg. I think it's interesting thinking about being niche in your client base, because in the kind of VA freelance work that I do outside of Moxie, I do find myself having a pretty niche client base. The people that I do a lot of VA kind of problem solving for all have similar personalities and needs. I solve those problems in very different ways. So I found kind of my niche in VA work is working with very visionary folks and then helping them take their vision and execute it. But so my
really
client
nice way of
base
saying disorganized.
Visionary, Jeff. Visionary.
Visionary. You can't write disorganized on your website when you're trying to sell it. But I do find that is kind of the niche bit that I work in is I'm not a very visionary person. And so, but I can see someone else's vision and kind of take that and help execute. So I don't know if that answers either of your questions. I'll let Jeff and Greg also chat on can you think of a niche example in that field?
I kind of want to drill into something you just said, because I think it's really cool. And that is, you just said, you like taking other people's visions and helping them execute it. I think that in and of itself is a lovely way to establish an effective niche and kind of supersedes the client versus services thing. It's one formula for niching down might be, I want to find clients who have a specific vision for their business or their project, or their organization. And I want to bring a set of services to the table that help them execute that. Because I mean, I've got a fairly specific user base these days, but they give me lots of variety in terms of problems to solve. But you prompted something in me when you said that. It's like, yeah, everyone's got these great dreams. I don't know how many clients I've been on calls with where they've said, I've been meaning to get around to, content strategy, this, and, client outreach, that. And it's like, oh, it's just hard to get to, especially when you're a small, a small outfit like us. And it's like, okay, well, let's help them push, you move the needle and kind of get the ball down the field further. That in and of itself is a valuable service. And if you can shape that offering from a marketing perspective so that it lands in the lap of a specific audience that has that particular problem or that is trying to achieve that particularly cool, objective, then you're basically coming to the table saying, I'm going to help you take your cool ideas and make it happen. And I've said that to clients pretty much verbatim before. It's like, okay, time to stop talking about it. I know how to do this shit. Let's do it. Oh, we're recording. Sorry for the yes bomb.
It's fine. We're here for it. I do want
I
to try to
believe-
get to these
I believe
too.
Michelle actually has a disclaimer that there will be occasional F-bombs on our workshop series. So you're good.
Yeah, well, if you're going to put me on, you better get that fucking disclaimer in there.
I do want to quickly get to these two if we're able to. Colin asked, do you get a majority of your leads through traditional networking, or what's your social media presence like?
Is that to me?
This to you, Greg. Yes.
Okay, I have, I'm a pretty good example of a horrendous social media performance. In fact, I didn't know you do external VA work, so yeah, we're going to talk. But yeah, I purposely, just from a philosophical perspective, I've largely abandoned social media, other than to have a presence for the business because I have to. But because it's a fairly tight niche, and because even like regionally, I could probably just hit local and get enough business to carry me through to retirement. I'd rather not, but I get enough word of mouth and I get enough sort of random traffic and people just tripping over my efforts. However, now that the rebrand's in place, I'm actually about to hire marketing resources to be able to focus. I think with the switch from Facebook to Meta and the Musk factor in Twitter and whatnot, I think we're seeing some pretty grotesque examples of how social media might not necessarily be the most predictable and lovely foundation. I think a couple of the richest people in the world owning the primary means by which we talk to each other and conduct business may not be a sound business decision for the rest of us to continue on. So there's my soapbox moments when it comes to social.
I love that. That was for free.
all very useful platforms, but I think people, hang their hat on them a little too tightly. I'm a little biased because I kind of do it for a living, but I think having a killer website with an amazing content strategy and some really effective community building tools like, I don't know, the one we're doing right now, those I think carry more weight. That's where my focus is. And that's actually what I'll be doing with this rebrand newly in place. My focus will be on content strategy and tools to help the community within the context of the services that I offer. Make sense?
Yeah. We're a bit over time, but I do want to ask this one. Do you wish you would have niched earlier, or did you feel like it was the right time?
It was the right time. Yeah. I mean, I could have niched earlier. Didn't want to. I was busy doing other things. I do lots of things. Maybe 5 years from now, I'll do something else. I doubt it. But I think, as I said in the first slide, I think it was kind of like all these different experiences that all contributed to be able to set me up to do this. You know what I mean? I can't think of anything, even the stupid touring with a punk band in the 80s, like all of that stuff built onto my skill set that created the unique entity that is me and by extension, my business. And those are the service, it's drawing on those experiences and the value that I'm able to bring, that unique value proposition that I'm able to drop on my target audience. That's what shapes who I am. And that's what shapes my niche. And I think if I did it any sooner, I wouldn't be here yet. And I think it's always constantly evolving as well.
That's an awesome answer. I mean, I think, you can never look back on gaining business experience and think, oh man, I wish I made the decision I made yesterday 10 years ago, because you didn't have the same tools in your tool belt and experience and knowledge. And, a lot of it's, especially with niching, is self-reflection and like figuring out where you want to spend your time, because it sure is a lot more fun working when you enjoy the people you're working with. So
it's true. I know I'm over time and I want to leave you a chance to announce as well, but there were 2 strategic decisions that I made in my career and throughout my life that I think were key, and they were decisions that needed to be made in the moment. Quit high school to go on the road with a rock band. Hands down the best decision I ever made in my life. And I think the second best decision was work your ass off for 22 years to land in a senior management position in IT and get that 6-figure salary, only to leave it and join the abject poverty and freelance life. Also the second best decision I ever made. Those needed to be made in the moment at that time. So when the time is there for the decision, definitely make it. Don't be afraid to jump in with both feet. But at the same time, some decisions like niche down, don't niche down, make them when you're ready.
Well, Jeff, go ahead and wrap us up.
Yeah, so that was awesome. We've had a lot of demand recently for a place to continue these conversations. So we are actually going to be launching a Facebook group. Facebook's not my favorite platform, but it seems to have the best group functionality out there. So we're going to bite the bullet and do it. So everybody who's on our mailing list will get an invitation. The group's going to be called Freelancing with Moxie. We'll have ongoing conversations from our workshop series. We can give tips and tricks around using our software, general discussion about freelancing, successes, struggles, etc. So it'll be fun to have another place to chat with our audience and users and all that. So look out for that invitation in the next week or so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We will be back in 2 weeks. A huge thanks to you, Greg. And thanks to everyone who joined. Great questions as always. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Michelle.
Cheers.
See ya.
See ya.